Welcome to Tech Notice, my friends. Nvidia released the 3080 and 3090, probably the best looking GPUs ever. But the question is, if you are a Premiere Pro user, how well do these perform on Premiere Pro if you're an editor, for example? So there might be some surprises for you, but this is why you're here and this is what we're going to talk about. So let's dive deeper into the analysis and figure out who the 3080 and 3090 are for right after this.
Are you sick of seeing activate Windows message on your desktop? Well, it's time to activate your Windows and do it cheap. Go on to whokeys.com where you can find official license keys not just for Microsoft, but all sorts of game CD keys, including Steam CD keys, Origin CD keys, Uplay CD keys, and so on. If you're looking for Windows 10 Pro key, for example, then all you have to do is search for Windows 10 Pro, select the license and add it to the basket. Use the code TN20 to get a 20% discount. Once you have the license key on your email, click here, type in your license key, hit activate, and you're all done. Check out whokeys.com in the description below, and don't forget to use the code TN20 to get a 20% discount.
So a few quick notices before we start this video. If you don't know which cards I'm talking about, I'm going to leave links for all these cards in the description, as well as some other more, important and useful information. So if you're looking for these cards, GPUs, definitely check out the description where you can find these cards if you're not familiar with the cards. All the information or the article that I'm basing all this analysis for is from a Puget Bench, and they are absolutely awesome. Probably the best, if not, one of the best workstation computer build guides who build just workstation PCs, and they do a lot of good analysis and things. So I'm going to leave the original article in the description below where you can read it, but on top of the article, obviously there are some of my own thoughts and some of the things that they didn't mention, but adding some on top as well. So let's start. First of all, there's a few specs of these cards that we're going to look at on the screen over here. We're going to go for the cards of 2060 Super, 2070 Super, 3070, 2080 Ti, 3080, Titan RTX, and finally the 3090. In fact, the 3070 is not released at this point, but will be released at some point in November 2020. Depends when you're watching this video, so probably stay tuned and subscribe for the updated version of this video. So now let's look at the overall performance of the GPUs. Now, before we're gonna jump into that, I know before everything there is something, but this is very important to understand how Premiere Pro works. Premiere Pro is mainly a CPU based workload. Okay, so the program utilizes the CPU mostly, and GPU is kind of like the crutch, that's not a crutch, but like a secondary utilization that the program will use. The GPU will not be used at all times, but the CPU will be used at all times, if that makes sense. So it's better to put all your money more on a better CPU than a GPU if Premiere Pro is your main workflow program that you're using. Now, said that doesn't mean that the GPU is completely useless. There are cases where the GPU will be used, and if that is your workflow where you use a lot of these types of things that can utilize this GPU, then the GPU can speed up your workflow, sometimes even up to 2 times, but it depends what hardware you're using. So let's dive into that, and then you'll figure out why is it 2 times and things like that. Most importantly, playing ProRes and H.264 codecs does not currently utilize the GPU acceleration. Neither does exporting to ProRes on Premiere Pro, which means that most of these cases that Puget Bench tested these GPUs, that covers most of half of these test kind of sets where CPU is the main workload, not GPU. By the way, if you're After Effects user, then the same story is on After Effects. CPU mainly, GPU secondly. Okay, that out of the way, let's have a look at the first graph over here. So looking at the overall scores of how did it do on Premiere Pro, we can see that the 3090 and 3080 are on top of the charge, which is nice to see that obviously there's been improvement, which you would expect, and they are on top of the charts and actually topping off some of the much more expensive cards like the Titan RTX, which is another £1,000 more expensive, $1,000 more expensive than the 3090, and it beats even dual 2080 Ti setup which is very interesting as well. So it's good to know that these cards are cheaper and better than the previous version. Secondly, looking at the chart over here, you can see that AMD is not doing very well. And that's why we're not going to talk about AMD so much and just kind of push it on the side and off the table over here, because it's not too much, there's no point of wasting time on the AMD bit. We want to focus on the Nvidia bit and how Nvidia is doing. The 3090 gains the performance about 3% over 3080 if you look at the overall score, which is not that much, and the 3% is quite hard to justify for most people looking at the price point. But that also doesn't mean that the 3090 is not the best GPU in your workflow. We're going to dive into a little bit more deeper workflows where the actual hard or heavy GPU effects, where the 3090 actually can stretch its legs and run a bit faster than the 3080, but we'll get to that in a moment. Just looking at this first graph over here, it's interesting to see that between the 3090, which is the best card at this point in time, and the 2060 Super card, okay, which is kind of the lowest of Nvidia cards. Let's knock the 1080 Ti out over there, but the 2060 Super, which is still in production actually, Nvidia still makes these cards at this point of when I'm making this video. They haven't stopped the production of this yet. Between the 2060 Super and 3090, there is not that much of a difference. All these cards are within the 10% of each other. So it's not that the 3090 is so much better in overall performance on Premiere Pro than the 2060 Super. It just shows that Premiere Pro is mostly CPU based, not GPU based. If you want like the best bang for buck card, then you can go with 2060 Super, which I'm actually running myself on my main editing station over there, because you get the most performance kind of for your money. So now let's look at the export scores. So we have another chart over here. Obviously, again, we have the 3080 and 3090 on top of the chart. It's interesting to see that in this point we are, looking at the H.264 chart over here, which is GPU accelerated. You can use the hardware encoding over here since the 14.2 update of Premiere Pro. If you are running any newer versions from 14.2, you can use the hardware encoding and then get these GPUs to accelerate your exporting times. So now we can see that the 30 series gains over the 20 series gains is a bit more than we saw on the previous overall scores. So there is a bit of a more difference between 2060 Super, as I can see over here, and the 3080, for example. It's interesting to see that the 3080 is faster than 3090. They're essentially the same within 1 point, which is what, 0.5%, I think, roughly difference, which is within the margin of error. So they're pretty much the same. But as you can see, both cards beat the 2080 Super by about 12% and the 2080 Ti by 6% and even 3% faster than the dual 2080 Ti setup. So now we can see that the 3080 and 3090, because they're essentially performing the same in this test over here, are about 15% better than the 2060 Super over here. But if you're looking at the price difference, then the price difference over 3080, for example, is about 43% more expensive, a few times more expensive if we're looking at the 3090 at that. So if you're looking at the export things, then 2060 Super still seems to me like one of the best bang for buck cards if you're looking at just the export kind of scores over here. But this is only exporting at H.264, remember that, because this is one of the ones that is GPU accelerated. Now let's have a look at the heavy GPU effects. This is where the cards can stretch their legs and do a bit of a run for their performance and actually use all the power over there. Not all effects on Premiere Pro are GPU accelerated, but some of them that are, I'm gonna mention just a few of them. So if you know you're using them, you know, oh, actually my graphics card can utilize the power and maybe it's worth for me to get a bit higher graphics card to, get a faster workflow. So the heavy GPU effects test here looks at live playback and export performance with the sequence that have a large number of GPU accelerated effects. And some of them are like Lumetri color, ultra key, sharpen, Gaussian blur, basic 3D, directional blur, VR digital glitch, and VR denoise. There are more, but these are some of the main ones that they're using. So now we can see that the RTX 3080 beats the 2080 Super by about 20%, which is quite a lot, and 2080 Ti by 10%, and dual 2080 Ti by 5%, which is incredible. Now the 3090, which is a much bigger difference over here, is about 10% better or faster than the 3080. So we're beating the 2080 Ti here by 21%. We're beating the dual RTX 2080 Ti by 15%, and that is huge. Now that shows very easily to me that there is no point of buying a Titan RTX card anymore if you're using Premiere Pro, because the Titan is another £1,000 or dollars more expensive than the 3090 card, and the 3090 performs better than the Titan RTX. So now compared to the 2060 Super, we can see that the 3080 is about 40% better, and the 3090 is up to or about 60% faster than the 2060 Super card, which is quite a lot. So if we are using heavy GPU accelerated effects, that is a big thing. Now, if you notice this, then the lumetri color is one of these effects that is GPU accelerated. So if you're doing a lot of color grading, you're shooting log, and the natural workflow is always slapping lumetri color on LUTs on and things like that, then it's worth thinking about a better GPU, especially the 3080 here, which is about 40% better than the 2060 Super. And if we just compare this quickly to AMD over here, then the 30 series are about 2 times faster than the AMD GPUs on this tests. So just to cap up this part of the test, this is where the GPU difference will matter the most, okay? This is where you can actually see the difference, so bear that in mind. Let's have a look at the live playback now. Live playback is another one of these things where it's not really utilizing the GPU. That's why, as you can see over here on this chart, most of them essentially score exactly the same, right? There's no that big of a difference between the 2080 Ti. Look, 2080 Ti and 2060 Super are essentially the same. In fact, 2060 Super has what, 0.9 points better than the 2080 Ti, which makes absolutely no sense and is a little bit mental. And you can see that the 2060 Super and 3080 pretty much perform the same. So if you're looking at the live playback, then it doesn't really matter, okay? You can dive in deeper a little bit on this chart as well, and you can find the link in the description of this chart where different codecs have been tested on how they play back and things like that. So let's wrap this up and see where we're standing. Okay, so we know that the 30 series are absolutely awesome cards, very powerful and much cheaper than the last gen top of the end, even better than, you know, the more expensive cards from last generation, okay? That are still more expensive to this day. So it's nice to see the 30s, you know, top of the charts pretty much everywhere. Now, looking at the bang for buck aspect over here and the general, if we just kind of overall and generalize all these tests, then the best bang for buck is still 2060 Super. I just created this little table over here where you can see how much or how many points you're paying per dollar. Okay, so you can easily see like the cards as they're increasing, how many points. So when you pay more, how many points do you get for your dollar? Just like another little analysis point where you can, what you can consider. So the two big questions here that you're probably questioning, and what I had as well, is should I upgrade? And if I'm building a new system, then what type of GPU should I get? Now, it's very hard for me to just generally slap the answer over across your face and say this is what you should be doing, because I don't actually know what is your workflow. But hopefully during this video you can actually see that depending on your workflow, in some cases it is very, very beneficial to get the 3080 or 3090 card. For example, if you're doing a lot of color grading, then it's worth going with the 3080 or 3090 cards where they are absolutely flying and doing a lot of the work. Yeah. But if you're not using that many GPU effects, then it's much more beneficial to go with 2060 Super. Okay, so I was thinking about myself, and you know, if I was you, then what would I say to myself? I would say that the first GPU that I would get is kind of 2060 Super. Obviously, it would have been interesting to see what the 16 series GPUs, how they performed on the charts as well, how close the 16 series are to the 2060 Super. But In this case, I would go with the 2060 Super card, okay? Not 2060, but 2060 Super, okay? There's a big difference over there. I would go with that card, okay? And then when I'm thinking, if I'm doing a lot of GPU accelerated effects, then the next bang for buck, I would jump to 3080, okay? Because the 3080 costs roughly the same as a 2080 Super, but the 3080 Super gives you more performance for it, and it's so much more beautiful as well. It's absolutely gorgeous. So this is like what I would get. If you want the absolute best card for Premiere Pro, then it is the 1390, okay? If you want the best bang for buck, it is the 2060 Super. If you're doing a lot of GPU effects and that are heavy on this, I would skip all the 20 series and jump straight to 3080. Now, here's the tip. I'm going to tell you this a bit secretly, is that because of the 3080 launch, a lot of people are selling the 2080 Ti's for very, very cheap. So stay tuned. There's going to be a build coming up where we're going to be building a build where I got a 2080 Ti very cheap. So it's worth looking at the deals. I'm not saying this very easily, and I don't usually recommend this because when buying secondhand stuff, there's always this risk involved. But at this point, you can get some pretty good deals, so it is still worth looking into if you're looking to save some buck. So this is the overall conclusion, how the 30 series graphics cards perform on Premiere Pro. Now, let me know if you want me to cover any other programs like DaVinci Resolve or any other ones, then comment that below, hit that like button, subscribe so you're not gonna miss any of those. Hit that bell icon on, so you don't miss them. I just want to say another special thanks to Plexity Plays over here. And if you don't know how this works, is there's recently YouTube added YouTube chapters, and you can add YouTube chapters. So what I've kind of said is that if you are commenting like full chapter of some of my older videos of like the outlay of the video, I'm gonna mention you on this video, and the Plexity Plays was the first one to do it. He commented all the kind of YouTube chapters for the budget USB microphone comparison. So thanks very much, you my friend, and there you go. If you want to do that, check out some of the older videos and just figure out what I'm talking about in the video. Put the chapters down, comment on there, and then you'll get a mention. Anyway, thanks very much guys for watching. If you have any other questions or any opinion that you really heavily feel like you need to express, I'll meet you in the comment section below, and see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.